former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who was in office from 2006 to 2009. Thanks so much for joining us. Just quickly, if you don't mind, just sum up for us the significance of what this means, disbanding his war cabinet, and whether it was expected or not.
Nothing is expected when it comes to the present Israeli government or the Prime Minister. So it's hard to say. I understand it. What I understand, and I'm not a commentator, I'm not into all the little political maneuvering. But I think that the war cabinet was dissolved when the two senior cabinet members, generals, former chief of staff, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, left the government. When they left the government, the war cabinet, which was made up of the two of them, and Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense and perhaps one other minister, has been dissolved. So there is no need anymore for this empty framework. It's Netanyahu and Gallant and Ben-Gvir, but not in the war cabinet, in the actual decision-making process. That's the practical outcome of this.
So talk to us about what this means, but also the last 2 or 3 weeks of developments, as you said, with a number of members already deciding to leave of their own volition. What it does for Netanyahu's grip on power and authority at the moment. Does it strengthen him, weaken him?
This in itself did not make any dramatic difference. It was known and obvious from the outset that these two generals that joined the cabinet after October 7th, precisely in order to be able to influence the decision-making process about the war, were not part of the integral part of the coalition. And the issue of their departure from the coalition was imminent throughout this period of time. And finally, they reached the conclusion that the influence is not sufficient to justify the continued membership in the cabinet. So they left. Question of Netanyahu's grip on political power, it depends entirely on the 64 members and also on the general distrust that is spreading against him rapidly. So I think that sooner than later, the distrust and the growing questions coming from participants in the coalition and the rioting and demonstrations in the streets will eventually topple the government. It's just a matter of time. Perhaps not as long as we thought a while ago. Now that the two senior ministers that were a very important addition to the perception of this cabinet as a reasonable one. Once they left, I believe that Netanyahu's weakness will become more apparent, and that will help bring him down.
Well, that's interesting that you think it will ultimately lead to the government being toppled, whether that process was started before today or not. Assuming that doesn't happen, does this alter the likelihood of a ceasefire?
I think that the likelihood of the ceasefire is going to be affected first by the apparent difficulties in continuing the military operation, with the loss of lives of Israeli soldiers, with the loss of life of uninvolved citizens in Rafah and in other parts, and the lack of any dramatic military achievement that can justify the cost. And also, of course, the erosion of the Israeli status in the international community, which is moving rapidly and very dangerously into the basic foundations of the status of the State of Israel, both inside and outside. So I think that there is a growing sentiment amongst a lot of people, including, I believe, in the army, which is made of mostly of the reserve soldiers, that it goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. We're not going to have any dramatic achievement that justifies these costs. And therefore, it will end. Of course, the main thing is that without a ceasefire and an agreement of Israel to pull out from Gaza, which is entirely reasonable, we will not have the hostages back. And the pressure on the government by the public to save the hostages, I think, is substantial, is very significant in pushing towards a ceasefire. It's obvious that the Prime Minister doesn't want a ceasefire because he is afraid that the ceasefire may make the political crisis much closer and much more dangerous to him. But I think that it's coming close.
Ehud Olmert, thank you so much for joining us.